Talk to me about what you think really about building strong, resilient hamstrings, and what are the most overlooked aspects there?
Well, one, I think, and I can't believe, and I don't mean to insult physical therapists, but there's still people doing leg curls.
A lot of people.
Like I look and think, and that's why people say, you get into this sort of function versus non-functional debate. But I have all of my kind of standard humor, but I said, if you think lying on your stomach, kicking yourself in the ass is going to stop you from pulling your hamstring, you are pretty wrong.
Guys, welcome back to the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. Every once in a while, you get a legend on your podcast, or you have the ability to talk to a great man in the field, and you're amazed that his reputation is spot on of exactly what he is. Mike Boyle is known as an outstanding intellectual, a great strength and conditioning coach, and he was all of that today, a true professional. Now, glad to call him a good friend. This was an awesome conversation. We talk about what got Mike to this level of being one of the greats in our field. We also talk about hamstring pathology specifically, how he approaches them, and then some common mistakes that PTs make, that strength coaches make, both in hamstring rehab as well in ACL rehab. Great conversation. I learned a ton. He has some unbelievable recommendations from books, from mentors, etc., and really just how to grow professionally. Let us know what you love, what you hated. Without further ado, here's my conversation with the great Mike Boyle of Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. Welcome back to the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. I am very excited about this conversation. Been following Mike Boyle forever. He is a giant amongst men in our field. How's that? How's that for an intro, Mike?
Wow, that's pretty good. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, our mutual friend Jeremy Bleich, I believe, used those exact words when describing you. So I appreciate your time getting on here. You've had an amazing career. You just told me you're about to be 66.
66 on Halloween. So let's say 28th. So I got 3 days. I'll be 66.
Okay. Still in outstanding shape, still training the world's best Jewish left-handed major leaguers, all of them.
Yes.
So that's a notch in your belt. Just tell me a little bit about your career, how you've grown to such prominence, and just hit a couple of major inflection points in your career that led you to where you are today.
Well, it's interesting because obviously at 66, I started in strength and conditioning really before there was strength and conditioning. So it was a dream, a pipe dream. I was at Boston University. I started out in athletic training, which is why I'm very comfortable talking to physical therapists. I majored in athletic training. I did my master's in athletic training. Thought I was going to be an athletic trainer. Got to Boston University as an athletic trainer for $13,500 a year. I'll have you know.
Big
And
money.
I was clearing almost $800 a month by the time I
That's insane.
and realized relatively quickly that I didn't really love managing injured athletes in that collegiate setting. I had really enjoyed athletic training at Springfield College. I did not enjoy it at Boston University. And at the same time, I had been sort of seeing this strength and conditioning thing develop. And I was a kind of wannabe athlete. I played freshman football at Springfield College. I always say my career, my standard joke, my career was ended by lack of size and lack of ability. But two things that are really difficult to overcome.
Yeah.
I did start lifting, and I was one of these kids, like I was lifting in the 70s for sports, trying to get better at football. And I found that I really liked it, that I was good at it. It was very rewarding. I think every kid at that age kind of those were the ads about, you didn't want to get sand kicked in your face at the beach, and you wanted to be able to meet girls, and everybody wanted to have muscles. So I became a weightlifter of sorts. Started competing in powerlifting in college. So I was really into it. I'd kind of drank the Kool-Aid a little bit by that time, and then realized, hey, I really want to be a strength coach. So at BU, I resigned my full-time job. I got a bartending job on the weekends.
Love it.
I basically appointed myself the strength coach. If you can imagine, I walked across the hall. There was a little weight room across the hall from the athletic training room, and I just walked across there and sat my ass down and said, I'm the strength coach. And strangely, because of the way the environment was then, no one told me I couldn't do it. I think now, sort of in modern day collegiate sports, if you just decided to set up shop somewhere, someone would quickly kick you out. No one kicked me out. As a matter of fact, people came in and kind of inquired about, hey, can you help me? Can you show me how to do this? Can you help me with a program? And we had at that time, very interesting. When I was there, Rick Pitino was the basketball coach when I got to Boston University,
I've heard of
and
him.
yes, he's had a decent career, and
Because of the strength coach at Boston University. He's had a
yes,
great
well,
career.
he actually left. I never worked for Rick. I played some pickup basketball with Coach Pitino, but I never worked for him. But he left almost immediately about the time that I started doing strength and conditioning. I can't remember if he went to Providence or the Knicks, but that was like his first big jump out of Boston University. And, but his assistant, John Custer, took over, who went on to be a longtime NBA coach. And John came to me and said, we'd really like to run an organized preseason program for the basketball team. Would you do it? And all of a sudden I was like, yes, I am the strength coach right now. Somebody just kind of validated me by asking me to do this. And relatively quickly, I was able to sell the football program on letting me help them. And then the hockey program, which is the biggie at Boston University, then came and said, hey, we'd like to get involved in this. And with hockey at BU, then my career really took off in terms of obviously we had guys that were going to go to play in the pros and play in the Olympics and playing, everywhere. So I became a hockey guy sort of very much by accident. So that's the
What
Reader's Digest version for you.
Yeah, but what did first of all, what did strength and conditioning look like in the 70s? What'd that weight room look like?
This was actually 84 at this time. And so at that time, the weight room was 600 square feet. It was a couple of Nautilus machines, 2 squat racks, and 2 benches. That was the weight room. And I actually had to get rid of some equipment when I started training the football team so I could get more football players in.
Yeah.
And I mean, we curled in the hallway and we got rid of some of the machines that were in there because at that time, like everybody, they had bought into the Nautilus idea. So initially, the room was filled with just all Nautilus single station machines. We got a lot of that stuff moved out to another room and made enough room to be able to get. I think we were probably getting 16 guys in the room at a time, and we probably had 4 guys at each bench and 4 guys at each squat rack, and it was a very, I mean, as basic as it could get, upper body day, lower body day, and then guys kind of switched the next day. And it was, I mean, if I look at it now, it was pretty sad and embarrassing, to be honest. But at that time, it was progressive because we had an organized strength program. We were teaching our guys how to do the lifts. We were trying to program for them in terms of figuring out sets and reps and weights and things. And because I had been competing in powerlifting and coaching powerlifters, I was pretty comfortable helping people get stronger.
So how do you start filling in the gaps? And because the same question applies to today, where we're always trying to get better, we're always trying to learn. So at that point, how are you filling in the gaps then? And then how do you do that now at 66 years old? How do you stay on top of your game?
One, I always try to find people that are smarter than me to talk to. That is the number one thing that I'm trying to do to fill in the gap. So I was really lucky.
That is what brings you to the True Sports Physical Therapy podcast.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. So who are you surrounding yourself by? You're the smartest guy
Well,
in the room.
I was lucky. So I always say lucky, and I always think it is luck in a way. It's outliers luck if you've read Outliers in terms
Sure.
of. I was in the hothouse at Springfield College. So one of my best friends at Springfield College was Steve Spagnuolo, who's now the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. He's had a tremendous NFL career. My dorm director and my real mentor was a guy named Mike Boyle. Mike was the longest tenured guy in the NFL as of retirement 5 years ago. He and Brady were tied with 6 Super Bowl rings before Brady got his 7th in Tampa Bay.
Wow.
Another guy, Rusty Jones, was there. Rusty was the second longest tenured guy in the NFL at that time.
What are they doing in Springfield?
They were all at Springfield College. Rusty Jones was a grad assistant football coach. Mike Wojcik was the grad assistant throws coach for track and field. Spags was a wide receiver on the football team. Dave Tobe, special teams coach for the Chiefs, was playing tackle for our football team at that time. It just, these guys, everybody was there. It just was that sort of what Gladwell talks about in Outliers as, being in the hothouse. You're just there. You're like in the Renaissance, right? You're there with the best sculptors and painters and all those things. I was just there with these people and had no idea at the time who they were or how influential they were going to be. But I was around like-minded people who really wanted to get better. And that the Springfield College education really encouraged that in you. They gave you this idea that you could teach anything, you could coach anything. They taught you that you could. Their idea was that if we teach you coaching, you can coach any sport. And we were educated that way. So I came out and I thought I can be a football strength coach, I can be a basketball strength coach, I can be a hockey strength coach. I've always laughed because I'm perceived as a hockey guy now, but now I've never played in a hockey game ever in my life. I've never been in an organized hockey game. I went to work for the Red Sox for 2 years. I've got a World Series ring. I was a very average little league baseball player up till about 12. And again, that was another one. That was straight out lack of talent. That wasn't, I had the size at 12 to be able to continue to play baseball. Total lack of ability, and gave up baseball probably at 12. But I've been able to work in all these sports. I've been able to train Olympic level. I've trained Allie Raisman, who obviously won a gold medal in the Olympics. I trained Kayla Harrison in judo, who won a gold medal in the Olympics. We've been able to train. I worked with the women's soccer team in 2004 that won a gold medal in the Olympics. So I've been able to kind of jump across a lot of
Okay,
a
but
lot
you're
of
you're
places.
chalking too much up to luck because there's something about your mindset that allowed you to take in all this information, put all this information into work. Where does that come from?
I think my father was a coach, so I grew up I grew up in a house where both working, teaching, and learning were all really valued. My father was a high school teacher and then a high school assistant principal and then a high school principal. He was very good about bringing me home books. And at that time, they were history books because that was what I was interested in. But there were always books in my house. We were always encouraged to learn and we were always taught to work. His standard joke was that anybody with one job was lazy.
Love
So
that.
he coached football, he coached basketball, he umpired softball, he drove a truck in the summer, he drove a truck for Pepsi in the summer, and that was just kind of how we rolled. And so for me it was pretty easy. I couldn't believe that BU was letting me be the strength coach. I thought I'd be a gym teacher at Malden High School where I went to high school. And here I am, I'm at BU. I mean, one of my first weeks at BU, Dave Silk walks in from the '80 Olympic team and starts talking to me about training. And I'm thinking, you gotta be shitting me. I mean, and that's been my whole life in terms of it. It's like Forrest Gump in terms of people just showing up. And I think if you work really hard, I do believe that if you work really hard and you keep positioning yourself correctly, that good things will generally happen to you. That's why I'm always a little bit leery of people, much like I've had runs of good luck. When people have had lots of runs of bad luck, I get a little bit like, yeah, there's probably as much to that as there is to the good because uh, what do they say? I think preparation and hard work is the intersection of luck or something like that. It's you got
Something
to
like
be,
that.
you got to be there.
Yeah, you got to be
When
there
you-
and you got to work hard enough to put yourself in that position. But also, even just in organizing this podcast, there is just this outstanding sense of humility that surrounds you, despite all the accolades and all the people you've worked with. And I think that probably attracts people to you, and wants them to be around you. And I'm sure that's what those athletes saw.
I hope so. I think that is certainly what I try to project. I think there's a lot of people. I always say people who don't like me probably don't know me,
Ooh, I
truthfully,
like that.
and and the people who know me probably like me because I think I've generally been a person who I think I try to treat people fairly, try to do what I said I was going to do in any given situation. And I mean, we went. I mean, I loved my job. I worked 51 weeks a year for probably the first, I don't even know, 10 years I worked at BU, maybe 15 years I worked at BU. I took off the week between Christmas and New Year's, and that was it. That weight room was open. We were in there. I was meeting kids in the morning. If you wanted to train, if you wanted to get better, we were figuring it out. They say that I invented NFL combine training. I invented NFL combine training because we had a receiver who got invited to the combine at Boston University, Billy Brooks. Billy Brooks, again, if you follow football, he's in the Ring of Honor for the Indianapolis Colts. Uh, was a very, very good NFL wide receiver, but Billy wanted to go to the NFL, and it was like, okay, I need to figure out how to help this guy get to the NFL. But I've always been kind of a logic driven person, and I knew, oh, they do these tests. So
Let's
again,
train for the test.
right, let's train again. And you think that at that time was really smart. No one was doing it. And we went out and started training for the tests. And Billy went and crushed the combine. I think he got drafted maybe in the 4th round because it was Boston University. He
Yep.
was super fast, but he ran a 4.5 at the combine, which was very respectable, but not like burner level for a wide receiver. But he did well in just about every event. We had another guy his year, Gary Walker, who got drafted literally off of his combine performance. And he vertical jumped like 34 inches or something as a 280-pound center. And all of a sudden we had people coming around and saying, can you help me? Guys from Boston College were coming, agents were coming and bringing guys. And I was like Ellis Island in terms of, okay, bring me whatever you got.
I love
I'll
that.
train them in my spare time. And we just hustling. And then the same thing started happening with professional hockey players. But there is some intent to it. I knew I wanted to start training pro hockey players because there was so many of them in the Boston area. So I talked to an agent friend of mine who was a Boston University graduate, a guy named Bob Murray, who I was sitting by him on a plane, and I said, I had this idea. I want to train some pro guys. And Bob said, oh, that's a really good idea. I told him, I said, I don't want anyone that's currently playing in the NHL. And he kind of looked at me. He goes, why don't you want anybody that's playing in the NHL? I said, I know those guys. I see them around town. They're having a good time. They're making a lot of money. They're not going to listen to me. I need a bunch of your minor league guys who are desperate to make the NHL. And he literally said, I still remember this. We were on a plane coming back from Detroit from the Final Four in 1990. He said, I got 10 guys that fit that mold for you. 5 of those 10, I think, made NHL teams the next year.
Wow.
And then my business took off. All of a sudden, that next summer, I had 20 guys. The summer after that, I probably had 30 guys.
Well, I mean, so that attracts the hard workers. The guys who you and I have in common, the Brezes and the Bleisches of the world, they're some of the smartest dudes I know.
Mm-hmm.
So, by the way, like quick Breslow story. I'm in an elevator with Craig Breslow, who's was in the majors forever, and now, like you said, runs the Red Sox. And it was World Baseball Classic. World Baseball Classic had a pitch count. If you threw 50 pitches, you couldn't go for 48 hours or something, trying to protect the arms, the major league arms. So I said to Brez, I'm like, Brez, you pitched tonight. How many pitches did you throw? He goes, 40, 48. No, 49. I'm like, what do you count every pitch? He's like, I remember every pitch I have ever thrown. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. But I didn't know. He was the smartest guy in Major League Baseball at the time, probably still involved in Major League Baseball. But it's not just the hard workers that find you. It's the brainiacs. And so there has to be a piece of your training that is brainiac driven. I mean, you took their task of the combine and you deconstructed it to form your training platform. That's what we do as sports physical therapists all the time. What is the desired task? How do we get you to there? Where does that mindset come from?
I don't know, but I've always looked at the rehab side of it, and I've always, like, from a training standpoint, I've always studied. I always felt like I'm going to study what the rehab people are doing first, because I always thought, and even as we started thinking about any injury situation, ACLs, whatever it was, I'd be like, okay, what are they doing? What are the best people doing to get this guy back the fastest? So I think a lot of it is simple analysis in terms of it keeps coming back to what are the best people doing and I don't care what the research says, because I have a friend who always says research is sports history. They study what we did to figure out why we did it. And from a rehabilitative standpoint, I can remember being in college, and the Cybex and the Orthotron and people testing quad hamstring ratios, and me thinking, this isn't going to get guys back from ACL injuries. You can't go back to playing football from doing leg extensions and leg curls. And we were
Yep.
getting guys told, oh, that they should never do another squat again. Squats are going to damage their knees. And then I started running into the Gary Grays of the world, and people were saying, no, it's the exact opposite in terms of they shouldn't be doing all this open chain stuff. and everything should be closed chain. And then you start to explore that world. And I think for me, I was always exploring somebody's world, whether it was Stuart McGill's world, whether it was Gary's world. And I sat in the front row, I asked questions, I introduced myself. I know everybody, but I know everybody. And people say, oh, you know everybody because you're Mike Boyle. I'm like, I knew everybody before Mike Boyle meant anything to anybody. I was in the front row, staying after, asking questions, and genuinely being curious with whoever I thought the best coaches were. And that was just my MO from the get-go.
Mike, that's your secret sauce. It's not being in right place, right time. It's this thirst for the truth or the knowledge or what's going to get my guys, by the way, because it's not about Mike Boyle, it's about the guys you work with, to the next level. That's the theme here.
Yeah, true, but it is. And I always said that. I'm married to best practice. That's what I'm married to. And I want to know what best practice is. I don't care whether you're a squat guy or a clean guy or whatever you are. What I want to know is what's the best person doing. And the one thing I think I was better than most, I was quickly able to recognize who I thought was smarter than me. And then I was quickly able to change my opinion. McGill's the perfect example. I did another podcast earlier and I had said the first time I saw McGill talk, I just remember sitting there thinking, holy shit, this guy's smart. Like he's really, really smart. Like he really knows his material. And I went back after that lecture and I went back to the staff and said, hey, you know all the core stuff we were doing, right? And they were like, yeah, yep. I'm like, we're scrapping it all. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I just listened to the smartest guy I've ever listened to talk about back pain, and we're doing it all wrong. We were doing sit-ups and crunches and leg raises and knee ups and just all kinds of stupid shit now when you look at it.
Yep.
And here's Stuart, talking about stabilization and then again, but I continued down the path. Then I go to Porterfield and DeRosa and I read mechanical low back pain. And then I start talking to people who are saying, you really got to listen to Shirley Sarman. So I start trying to scrounge up Shirley Sarman stuff before, because she hadn't written a book. So you had to find people that had notes or people who had gone to St. Louis University.
Yeah.
Right. But then she finally wrote Diagnosis and Treatment of Movement Impairment Syndromes. And it was like, bang, bought it, read it, tried. I mean, again, read some parts of it over and over again because it was she was a little smarter than me. But I just kept doing that stuff. I kept trying to figure out. I mean, I've been to Kevin Wilkes' knee and shoulder course 3 times.
It's awesome.
Literally 3 times. And I'm friends with Kevin. The first time I went up to Kevin. I talked to him, told him who I was, what I did. We went out, had a beer. That night, we had dinner. We talked. I talked to him all the time. Not all the time. I talked to him a couple times a year and, just checking in. How are you doing? But because I want to know those guys, right? You want to know who the best people are and you want to be able to have that communication. Greg Cook, I met Greg Cook. Darrell Leto introduced me to Greg Cook. Became friendly with Greg Cook because I was like, Darrell's really smart. Gray's really smart. I had a friend who worked for Mark Verstegen, and I said, I got to meet Mark Verstegen. So I went to Bradenton then when Mark was still at IPI, before when Athlete's Performance was just a twinkle in Mark's eye. But I went down there and said, hey, just let me sit on the turf here for a couple hours with a notepad and take notes. And same thing. Next thing I find we're at lunch 3 hours later, still talking about what's going to become Athlete's Performance and eventually Exos. But I think you have to put yourself in positions to be successful, and you've got to be, I guess you've got to be a little bit aggressive without being annoying. You don't want someone to think, I don't want to spend time around this guy. But at the same time, you won't get into the room if you don't ask if you can come in, right? So you've got to figure out. And that was the thing with Mark. I just said to Darrell, hey, Darrell, I want to come down and watch, because Darrell was working with Mark at that point. And he said, fine. I don't know how it'll be. I don't know what'll come of it. I don't know if Mark's busy, but I said, I don't care. As long as I can just sit in and watch some sessions, I'm good.
Okay. So your hustle, your willingness to adapt. And what I'm learning, like, as I've been doing this pod for the last year and a half or whatever, like I meet guys like you, I meet the Reinolds of the world, hung out with Wilk at a recent conference. And it's like, all these guys are very similar, like very down to earth, very, I don't know why you want to spend time with me, but happy to have you. So it's about having the gumption to say, I want to be next to you. I want to learn from you. And it sounds like that's another theme. It's like that open-mindedness, and it's also that grind and grit to get out there and follow him. I went down to I sent Cressy a random email like 4 years ago, pretended like I was going to be in Florida for something else, but really just got on a plane to go down and spend time with Cressy. And it's like, he's like, okay, yeah, if you want to spend time with me, spend time with me. Meanwhile, like fast forward however many years later, it's like guys running the freaking Yankees and always willing to hop on a call or shoot an email. It's a pleasure.
And I mean, he spoke, his probably first speaking engagement was one of our seminars when he was just getting out of UConn, right before he'd opened his business. And same thing. Yeah, I think there's a lot of commonalities in successful people,
Yeah.
as there are lots of commonalities in unsuccessful people.
Yeah. Good call. So you mentioned like kind of being up on the latest and greatest, let's say when it's combine prep, being willing to learn and adapt as you've taken things in. I want to dig into the hamstring posterior chain world because you put out a bunch of content on it recently. Highly recommend everyone check this guy out on Instagram. I'm sure they already are. Talk to me about what you think really about building strong, resilient hamstrings, and what are the most overlooked aspects there?
Well, one, I think, and I can't believe, and I don't mean to insult physical therapists, but there's still people doing leg curls.
A lot of people.
Like I look and think, and that's why people say, you get into this sort of function versus non-functional debate. But I have all of my kind of standard humor, but I said, if you think lying on your stomach, kicking yourself in the ass is going to stop you from pulling your hamstring, you are pretty wrong. And I look at that and think, some people, oh, it's going to be good. It's going to get some blood flow to the muscle. I'm like, you can do that 9 million ways. What the heck? You have to have somebody lying face down. If you just think about the idea of function, and I always say functional training is the application of functional anatomy to training. So when we start looking at the hamstring, we think, wow, really complex muscle, right? Hip extensor.
Yep.
Probably not much of a knee flexor, really. Maybe a little, but not a lot. Much more of an eccentric controller of leg extension when we really look at what it's doing in the swing phase.
Yep.
It has to work in conjunction with the glute, which I think is a big missing piece in terms of people try to rehab the hamstring, but not as it co-contracts with the glutes, because that's the other thing that you're seeing. So when I start seeing hamstring rehab, one, you got it. Now I know you got to have a sprint progression, because that's the highest stress that you're going to get when you start looking at speeds up to 8-10 meters a second. That's the kind of stress that you need. But you've got to figure out how to get there.
Yep.
And then you've got to look at the hamstring and say, okay, I've got to train it as a hip extensor. I've got to train it as an eccentric controller of leg extension. I've got to train it as in its shortened co-contracting role with the glute in sort of, hip thrust, hip lift kind of exercises. So you start looking at it. And then you get like the oversimplification of the Nordic people, because, and I hate to say this, I have no beef with Vald, but you want to make that Nordic really important when you're selling a $70,000
Right.
tool to
Yep.
evaluate that. I think it's very much like what happened to us with the Cybex, in terms of it's very much the cart pulling the horse along here. Not that it's not important, just that it's not the be all end all. And then what you start to realize is you watch the whole Nordic thing, and that's a lot of what I've been posting about on Instagram lately. You watch what people are calling Nordics, and you think, I don't know what those are.
They're not Nordics.
They're not Nordics, and they're just really bad. They're badly done. It's like a badly done way to make your hamstring sore, I guess, is the way that I would phrase a lot of what you see. And again, Tyreek Hill will probably beat me up when he sees me, but I watch the Tyreek Hill ones and I think they're impressive, but they're wrong.
Because why? Tell me why.
Because he flexes his trunk. You can't flex your trunk. I think when you're doing this, so if I'm going to attempt a Nordic type of exercise, and for us, we begin what we would call just a hamstring iso. So it's just a Nordic lean, really, might be what most people recognize it at. But in that Nordic lean, I need a really solid glute contraction. I need a really solid anterior abdominal contraction. And then I need that eccentric hamstring stress into an isometric hamstring stretch. But if when I get to that, I fold in half, I've lost it.
Yeah.
Because what I'm trying to do is I'm turning my glutes off and I'm shortening the lever. I'm effectively trying to make it easier. It's just physics, right? So when we look at that, and then when we think, okay, if I'm going to go to true eccentrics, now I'm going to try to fall in that way. But as I'm falling, I always tell everybody, as soon as you trunk flex, exercise over.
You're done.
Get it. You're done. Unless if someone said, I'm trying, I want to make it more like a razor curl. I want to intentionally try to lengthen. I'm thinking, okay, I can see if you told me you were intentionally trying to lengthen, I might find some level of agreement with you. But in general, I need, we were, do you know Scott Livingston at all? He's a Canadian PT, but
No.
Scott's a really bright guy. But he was talking about the other day, like you want to keep the bowl stacked. So your pelvis is bowl, your ribs are bowl. I got to keep bowl over bowl as I'm doing these exercises. If I don't do that, if I allow it to break, then I've defeated the purpose. So you start thinking about, again, that's where you're thinking about hamstring as eccentric controller, which is, I think, a big function when you're in that swing phase and you're going 10 meters a second. That thing, I always say, if your hamstring didn't work as an eccentric controller, you would kind of run like the drum major where your legs just kept whipping out in front of you, and they don't.
Yep.
They get pulled in tight. But what they're being pulled in, it's not a knee flexion action as much as the eccentric resistance of leg extension. So I guess my point being, and I could beat this to death, but I think most people don't really understand the multiple functions of that muscle and look at it and think, I got to hit that thing from a bunch of angles. And the one angle I don't need to hit it from is the on my stomach angle. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
It's a
just,
prone angle.
right. I just don't get it. I look at that and think, yes, you can make the muscle contract that way. But I feel the same way about leg extension. I've still, leg extensions that made a big comeback. I haven't had anybody do a leg extension in, I couldn't even, maybe 30 years, maybe 40 years. I don't know when the last time I programmed a leg extension was, but it was absolutely before 1990. So what would that be? 35 years from now.
35 years. Okay, so if I totally hear your point is, the hamstring is functioning very differently in hip flexion than it is in hip neutral or hip extension, right? And that's why are we spending so much time in a prone position doing hamstring curls? That's not what shows up on the field. Totally get that. How do you reconcile the need for hypertrophy? Like, where are you getting that type of stimulus, and how important is that?
We can slideboard leg curl. I love slideboard leg curls, and I would look at slideboard leg curls and think it's literally the same exercise upside down. But now I can get the glute co-contraction that I want in the slideboard leg curl, and
Yep.
I can get more emphasis on that eccentric control, and then I can get the leg curl action. So if I want the leg curl action, I can find plenty of ways to get it. That's probably the only way we do it. But I also think you're going to hypertrophy from, what people call single leg RDL. We would prefer to call it a one leg straight leg deadlift. That's like a fundamental exercise for us. And it's probably why we don't have a lot of hamstring pulls, because we want our guys to be able to one leg straight leg deadlift at least half their body weight working towards their body weight. We want our guys to be able to do these Nordic isos and eventually these eccentric Nordics. We would call them hamstring isos, hamstring eccentrics, because I don't love using the
Why do you hate
Nordic.
that?
I hate all the country references.
Right.
I'm
Why
stuck
do you
with
hate the
split
country
squat.
references?
I don't know. It just seems I guess because Bulgarian split squats weren't Bulgarian. So I think
Okay.
that's where I got bothered. And Romanian deadlifts weren't really Romanian. I'm like, we were doing Romanian deadlifts before any Romanians came over here to teach weightlifting, and we were doing Bulgarian split squats before the Bulgarians came over and taught them. So it just bugs me when we have to give them. Also, I think when
Mike,
you're
that's the
trying,
first time you have sounded like a 66-year-old dude. Everyone's got to have their shtick.
but when you realize, though, when you're in this situation and you're looking at the naming of exercises, also, I want exercises like when I say rear foot elevated split squat,
Yep.
somebody should be able to look at that and think, okay, if I just did what you said,
Yeah.
okay, I know what a split squat is. I know how to elevate my rear foot. I know what a rear foot elevated split squat is. And I think every exercise should be descriptive. My standard joke, again, I have all the same jokes, but when somebody says, which one is the pull down? I'm like, that's the one where you grab the handles and you pull down. We did a pretty good job of naming a lot of these. And
Yeah.
most of the stuff is pretty well named. So you can look at it and think, I don't really like when people seal rows, renegade rows, when they just kind of make up these terms. And I'm like, what's a seal row? What's a renegade row? Like, what's the
Like
difference?
that should be our biggest problem. That should be our biggest problem in the weight room. You're doing something right if naming the exercise is your biggest problem.
It is, absolutely. But it is, I'll give you the perfect example, the
Yep.
plyometric example,
Yep.
up versus jump. Some people go, oh, what's the difference? So I had given a guy a program in California, and we had always called hurdle hops, 2 legs. We were
Mhm.
hopping over the hurdles. But in reality, they're hurdle jumps. And this guy emails me one time and said, geez, your guys are so much more athletic than mine. I don't have one guy who can do the 30-inch hurdle hop. And I went, that's because it's a hurdle jump. And my terminology was off, right? And I'll give you another really good example of that. If you remember the old, I think it was the Sports Metrics ACL prevention program. Do you remember that?
What'd that look like?
Uh, it was a video that these guys in California had done, but they were calling lateral bounds lateral lunges, and that bugs the shit out of me. Like, that is not a lateral lunge, that is a lateral bound. If I bound from my right foot and land on my left foot, that is a lateral bound. That is
Yeah.
not a lateral lunge. A lateral lunge, I would be stepping, not
Yep.
jumping. And so I am a stickler for terminology, because I think you look at someone like me, my books are in 15 languages, right? You've got to be able to get information out to people so that everybody understands it. And if your book is filled with Bulgarian squats and Romanian deadlifts and Spanish squats and Turkish get-ups and God knows, Russian twists, it's like,
It's going to mean something different to everyone else.
yes,
So
people
that's
in
a great
foreign
point.
countries are going to be very confused.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Talk back to your hamstring world. Um, we know that, and you mentioned it, that the force that goes through a hamstring string in a sprint effort is higher than anything you'll see in the weight room. So many of these hamstring injuries happen at speed. How do you incorporate that speed, or how important is it in your protocols or in your weight room work?
It's absolutely critical. You got to start. You've got to get if you're not sprinting, if you're trying to rehabilitate hamstrings and sprinting is not part of the protocol, you will fail.
What's your build up to that? How do you build
So
up to
we
that?
start, we're big fly 10 people, and we'll
Yep.
start fly 10s with a 5-yard fly in, because if we control the length of the fly in, we control the velocity. And so we're increasing the distance that we're sprinting, but what we're really doing is increasing the distance of the fly. So from us, if I'm rehabbing somebody, initially it's just going to be, there was a great Boob Schneckstader article. I don't know if you're familiar with Boob, but he's a great track coach. And he was talking about, he said track coaches know more about rehabbing hamstrings than anybody else, because they get more of them and they don't get good athletic trainers. He said,
Fair.
track, everybody thinks no one's getting hurt now. No one's getting hurt at track. So he said, so track coaches have to be really good with hamstrings. And his whole thing is just, okay, day one, start walking. If you can walk and it's pain-free, day 2, jog. If you can jog and it's pain-free, stride. If you can stride and it's pain-free, pick it up a little bit. And those guys, they have a pretty good sense of, say, 60, 70, 80, 90%. And what you realize, and what I've realized with hamstrings, is if you just keep people sort of below a certain velocity threshold, you're
They're
not going to
good.
have a problem.
Yeah.
Right. But it's then bringing them back. And that's where that kind of fly-in progression works, in terms of, we're going to start with a 5-yard fly-in. So we're going to run a 15. We're going to do that for whatever, 2-3 sessions. And then what I'm going to do is probably go 2 at 15 and 1 at 20. So we'll go 5-yard fly-in, 5-yard fly-in. All right, back it up 5 yards, go to 10-yard fly-in, run 20. Let's see what that feels like. And you're always kind of looking at somebody and thinking, hey, does that grab? Where are we here on the speed continuum? Is that 80? Is that 90? Is that 100? And we're going to start working. The good thing for us now is, because we do this so much, we sprint twice a week, every week, with our athletes, timed. And so if I said to you, I want you to sprint at 80%, I could tell you exactly now what that number would be. If
Yeah,
you
that's
said,
awesome.
okay, I've run a 1-1 fly 10, I said, okay, I want 80%. I want you to run 1-3. And the other thing you realize, if you actually are timing and speed, is that 80% is really slow relative to 100%, where people will almost have to try to slow down to run at 80% when you're telling
Yeah.
them to sprint. So,
Now that
good.
makes a ton of sense, and I love that you do that. Do you incorporate any type of tempos in their strengthening program when coming
Yes.
back
So
to
we
try
would
to
be
mimic?
running. Yep. So, yep. There would be, because I think going hand in hand with the injury rehabilitation program is a reconditioning program. So part of that reconditioning program is going to be, like you said, tempo running. So, all right, we want to get some volume, we want to get some stress, but we want to keep that velocity under a certain point. So there we're going to be saying, I always say tempo is, it's not sprinting and it's not jogging. So it's that nether world in between the two. So sometimes I'll look at people and think that's not tempo, that's too fast. Sometimes I'll look at people and think that's not tempo, that's too slow. I don't want you to
Yeah.
jog. I don't want you to sprint. And sometimes it's almost a facial perceptual effort kind of thing. You can look at someone and think, nope, they're trying way too hard. If they're trying way too hard, they're going to aggravate that hamstring again, or they're going to aggravate that hip flexor again. But if they're smooth and they're relaxed, more than likely that isn't going to happen, because it really, for whatever reason, if you watch it happen, it is, and this is why sprinting is so important. The person gets hurt when they are trying to access 100%. Because you see it all the time. When you see it in soccer, you'll see that guy burst and then boom.
Yep.
You'll see it in football, the same thing. The guy will burst and then grab at his leg. And what usually, this is the reason I think people are making timing such a big deal right now. I want my athletes to have touched 100% a lot,
Hmm.
so that they're not applying some random stress when they're suddenly thinking, oh my God, whether, I got to catch somebody from behind or I got to run away from somebody. Now I got to run as fast as I can. And all of a sudden that person pulls up lame. Our
Yep.
guys are running for time all the time. So they're always accessing that area. I had a Premier League striker that I trained who had lots of injury problems, hamstring problems, calf problems, hip flexor problems. And when we first started timing him sprinting, he wouldn't sprint. And I took him aside and I said, okay, you have to run faster than this. I said, because when that ball goes in the air in a game and it's a foot race to get the ball, you are going to run as fast as you're capable of. This is not as fast as you're capable of. The reason you're getting hurt, and that's why there's a really good JB Marin article called Sprinting as a Vaccine. I don't know if you've ever seen the article, but
No.
really good article. And he starts the article with, I have to phrase this correctly. So he said, uh, high speed sprinting causes injuries, therefore athletes should not do high speed sprinting. So he starts with the sort of illogical premise that this is how they get hurt, don't do it.
Right.
I used to operate on that premise a lot. Like, I didn't like timing because I was like, timing day to me was always like, oh shit, somebody's going to pull a hamstring. But then I realized it was because we didn't prep for it.
Yep.
We just did it. So we started to view sprinting as training, not as testing. And for a long time, sprinting was just viewed as testing, whether it was baseball with the 60 or football with the 40 or whatever it was. All of a sudden you show up at camp and someone's like, oh, by the way, you got to run a 60 or you got to run a 40. And you've got some guy who's not really sprinted at all. And that guy comes up lame. And I used to look and think, well, logically, that's probably what should have
Makes
happened,
sense.
right?
Yeah.
We didn't prep
Yeah.
them. So now we sprint, like I said, there's, no matter who we're dealing with, 2 days a week minimum, you are sprinting
Now, how
time.
does tempo or pace of movement show up at all with their loading strategies?
In terms of what?
So for instance, we know that we need to get that hamstring contracting rapidly, concentrically, eccentrically. I'm going to ask you to move at a given pace when you're doing your slide board hamstring slides, your slide board bridges. Like, does that play a role in your rehab process as you're getting
It
guys
doesn't
back?
for me, no, because because we're gonna get that from our plyos, because the plyos are gonna be in there, the sprints are gonna be in there. So I'm gonna sort of, strength is gonna be strength. There probably won't be, like, I don't like, there's another, tantrums, right?
Yep.
I think tantrums, one, are stupid as an exercise, and two, are stupid as a name. When you watch somebody, whatever. banging their legs on a band or hitting their feet on a ball or whatever it is, and someone's thinking that that's teaching that hamstring to fire. I don't buy it. I'd much rather just run and jump, and we run, and for us, we run, so we sprint, we jump, meaning two legs to two legs, we hop, meaning one leg to one leg, and we will bound, meaning right to left. And again, we will do that twice a week. So everything, it goes back. Charlie Weingroff had the great, he called it training is rehab, rehab is training, right? When you go look, when I look at it and think, all we're doing in rehab is decreasing the speeds.
Mm-hmm.
And we may have to decrease that speed really, really down because I think rehab is strictly, it's about applying load and applying velocity, right? So I'm going to take somebody and you're going to give them to me. I don't care what you say is wrong with them. I'm going to start applying load to them.
Which is going to slow them down.
Yep, and in a tolerable range, right?
Yep.
And then I'm going to start asking them to load with more velocity. And if I can get somebody who can come back to the point where they're managing the velocities that they were managing prior to their injury and managing the loads they were managing prior to their injury, that person's probably not going to get hurt again. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's much more complicated than that. I think we make it more complicated, but you got to get somebody moving. You got to get somebody running. You got to get somebody jumping. You've got to figure out, okay, how tight am I pulling the reins, right? And every day you kind of, you let go a little bit, you let go a little bit, and then at some point you're like, okay, and that's that point of, I think a lot of people aren't good at what they clear people who really haven't gotten over the hurdles that they needed to get over. Suddenly it's like this person's cleared. And I look at it and think, I have that problem with the ACL thing. I think, again, because my son tore his ACL, like I look at people and think the 3-hop thing is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Well, I think that, unfortunately, it is still around. I think that is going away as we get better with some of the measurements that actually matter, that actually translate. And I think like as force plates become more universalized, I think we're getting far more information there. But I didn't think you were going to say triple hop. I thought you were going to say like the Cybex testing or the Kincom
Oh,
testing.
Cybex testing too, useless. I would
Right.
never, like I tell people, don't even do that at all. Don't, because I could care less what your isolated quadricep to hamstring ratio is. And I could care less what your 3-hop is. Because again, if you watch most 3-hops, and one, they're not the same right to left. It's not the same demonstration of the same activity. Generally, there's no cycling of the leg on
Yep.
the injured leg side. And it's just measure the distance. Okay. Oh, you did this distance and you're within 80%. And I mean, we see people get cleared. Sorry, I jumped from hamstrings to ACLs, but we see people get cleared, and then I see them come in, and they can't do a one leg squat. And I look
Yeah.
and think, how can you be cleared? You're in as unsafe a territory as you could possibly be.
Yep.
But we've been, so I think, and I think sometimes in physical therapy, it's difficult because you guys don't have a field and a turf and some of that stuff to have access to in most conventional.
True
Not you,
sports we do.
not
Okay.
specifically, no, but you know what I'm saying? But
Yep.
in the general sense,
I
most
agree.
people, someone told me, they said the triple hop was developed because you can do it in an office. And I thought, really? Would that be why they might have arrived at that?
I
Because you
mean,
could do it in the hallway or
it's bananas, and that wouldn't shock me. But even like one step crazier to me is when the physician says, "Okay, it's been 9 months, so you're good." And like when you think about that as a return to sport, like that just blows my mind. So okay, let's wind it down here, Mike, because I know you got a hot date tonight.
I do.
Tell me where you are on force plates, how you use them, and maybe some mistakes we make with them.
Well, I'm actually nowhere with force plates. We do not have one. I'm I'm sort of an anti force plate person. One, because for us, our general business is sort of larger group training,
Yep.
and it's not very cost effective. It's not very practical. I think right now I have called it the nerdification of strength and conditioning. I think we're in this incredibly nerdy phase, and what I don't like about the force plate thing is that people can tell me 1,000 things you can get, but they can't tell me 3 that matter. And so that bothers me in terms of, I look at that and think, okay, what am I trying to get out of this? And so that's also problematic for me. I think, if I was in the rehab world, I would be doing it because the ability to pick up asymmetries is probably too valuable.
Yep.
But for us, I don't think the force plate people don't want to tell you how to use a force plate, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think they should tell you, and you don't have to agree, and then you can certainly go off on your own and figure it out. But when someone comes in and tells you that there's these, well, we can look at, eccentric utilization ratio, we can look at eccentric rate of force development, we can look at this, we can look at this, we can look at this. I'm like, okay,
Tell me what matters.
tell me what matters. Tell me what's going to move the needle here
Yeah.
for my guy or my girl in this rehab setting that's going to really be of value. And I feel like we get a lot of good data from our jump mats
Yep.
that's going to be similar. And I look at it and I think it's simpler. I think if I get someone back to their best, like my son, when he did his rehab, we got his vertical jump back where it was higher than it was before he hurt his ACL. We got his fly 10 back to where it was faster than it was before he hurt his ACL. We got his, we would do 3 hop, but we were doing a 5 hurdle. And I said, when you can do 5 hurdles on that leg at 18 inches, that looks like your other leg,
Yep.
then you were good to go. And he went through all those progressions and did all those things, and he was good to go. And he's, knock on wood, he's been good for 4 years. So
Yeah. Listen, I think, by the way, we struggled with that initially because we went with one company who did exactly what you described. Here are the plates, here are the billions of KPIs that we can generate for you. And I'm like, dude, I went to graduate school. They didn't talk about force plates. You're the force plate. Tell me what the F matters. And I couldn't get it out of them. We have since switched companies. I'll tell you what it allows us to do. Number one, we have in-house force plate expert who has dictated, here are the KPIs that matter. Here is how you test for them. Here's how you're going to do it. And then we can roll it out across all of our companies. Now we're able to provide the same service without the 46 years of experience that you have to say that these hurdle hops look exactly the same, but we can objectively test. That's where I see the use, but it's
yep,
dangerous. But it's
I would
dangerous.
agree. Yep, I would agree. In your situation, I would absolutely say that works. If we were doing John Paloff, our physical therapist, he's got a set and
Yep.
he uses them, and there'll be times when we'll send somebody over and say, hey, get some numbers on this person. Let's see if what we think we're seeing is what we're seeing.
Yeah.
But in general, I think it's still we're a little bit of a slave to the tech right now, and particularly insurance companies love it, doctors love it, management people love it, but we're spending, I think, way too much time trying to get numbers and not enough time trying to train or to rehab. And I've seen that Major League Baseball. I've talked to some Major League Baseball coaches who say it is the bane of their existence.
Yeah.
Baseball,
It's too much.
baseball. They said it's constant. Everybody just wants, get me updated force plate numbers. Get me updated force plate numbers. I had one guy tell me he's like, I don't coach anymore. He said, I do force plate testing and I send reports to management.
It's insane, and that's super unfortunate. But I really value your take on it as a guy who's been through all of these fads. It's awesome to hear your thought on it, and that you're open to when they're used properly, how to use them. Okay, Mike, I'm going to let you go. Just give me one piece of advice. The one book in the last 3 years that you have been through that changed your outlook was what?
I think I keep going back to I loved Jeff Olson's The Slight Edge. I won't say it was in the last 3 years, but it's one that I find myself quoting a lot. And it's a very simple, it's really probably more of a business book, but it's about showing up and showing up with a great attitude. And I think maybe kind of what we talked about in the beginning, that's probably what I've been able to do on a pretty consistent basis, is show up and show up consistently and show up with a great attitude. And that's been really helpful for me in terms of having a career, I guess, and being able to do a lot of things and interesting. And then the other one I would say, not last 3 years either, but Legacy. I think Legacy was the best sports culture book that was ever written. I was just talking with somebody else today about I think the No Dickheads chapter should be mandatory reading for everybody in every field, because I think your life would be so much better if you just thought, no dickheads. I'm not having any dickheads in my life. I'm not hiring them. I'm not dealing with them. I'm not buying shit from them. I am just not doing it. And you would think, wow, my existence just got better.
Yeah, I love that. And then what was the other thing they did? Sweep the sheds?
Sweep the sheds, yeah.
Sweep the sheds. You're never too big to sweep the sheds.
I pick up trash every day at work, always. And I make a point of doing it because you want people to see you do it. Because if your employees see you do it, they do it.
Yeah.
If you set again, right? Like that's like parenting 101, right? You want to set a good example. You want to set a good example for your employees. You want people like the other thing. I don't ever call anybody employees. You will never, I get pissed when I meet somebody and then they introduce their coworker to me and say, he works for me.
Mhm,
You know what I think
mhm.
automatically?
Dickhead.
Dickhead. Yep. Right. I always say, this is so-and-so, we work together because we do. And
So,
yes, I'm in charge, but that's not,
did you
I
think
don't,
about that? Did you think about that when you called it Mike Boyle?
I did. I thought about it long and hard actually, and I'm gonna end up going a little bit longer. But when I remember I was sitting with Mark Verstegen and we were talking about the idea of branding and why he was athlete's performance. But what I realized was that I'd read a book and it said brands are created uh, by publicity, not by advertising. And everything that was coming around our business was around my name. And at that time, we were actually an old Frappier Acceleration franchise, if you can imagine. That's what we started out as. It was called
Yes.
Sports Acceleration North, and no one could find us. And people always said, I looked up Boyles, this was Yellow Pages time, right? No internet search. I looked in the Yellow Pages, I called information, I asked for Boyles, I asked for Boyles Gym, and there was nothing listed. I said, yeah, if you didn't ask for Sports Acceleration North, you wouldn't have got our number. You never would have found us. And
Yeah.
that was when I realized, okay, I need to get over myself and just realize that putting my name on it, because I've had this conversation with Eric with Cressy, same thing. I said, Eric, it's a really good problem. When you get to the point where people are worried about you being able to sell your business with your name on it, that's a really good problem to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always say to people, hey, it would be like being Mr. Toyota. Right? You
Yeah.
don't go to buy a Toyota and walk in and say, hey, is Mike Toyota around?
Yeah.
You're like, no, it's just a really good brand name, right? But it might have been, it's actually not somebody's last name, but it could have been, right? It's
Yeah.
the fact that it's associated with somebody's last name doesn't matter. If I say Cressy's, you say good baseball training,
Yep.
right? If I say Mike Boyles, you might say good hockey training. But
Yep.
and if I said, would you expect Mike Boyle to train you? You'd say, no, probably not. If I went to Cressy's, do you expect Eric to train you? You'd say, probably not. But you'd still associate it with quality.
Yeah. Well, that you've done, Mike. I mean, both in front of the camera, also behind the scenes. You've been an absolute pleasure. So thanks for the words of wisdom. Thanks for everything you've done for the profession. Like, I think you have built up, obviously, strength and conditioning, but you also give rehab a really good name. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Mike.
Well,
Guys, thanks
let's
for
do it again.
listening.
Okay.
Thanks for
All right,
listening. Let us know what you loved. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.